John chapter 18, verse 24. While you're turning there, last time we focused on the first phase of the Jewish trials of Jesus before his crucifixion, which entails Peter's three verbal denials and some other denials by his actions there. You remember Jesus let them bind him. He gave a demonstration of how they didn't have power to take him, and then he lets them take him. He lets them bind him there and take him before the high priest. Doesn't resist that. Peter forsook Jesus there at the arrest in the garden, just like all the other disciples did. But he can't stay away. He loves Jesus too much to stay away, but when he comes back, he doesn't come back to be close to him. He just wants to see what's going on there. And John, you remember, does get close, goes on. He's known to the high priest there. He goes in, and then he tells the slave girl at the gate to go ahead and let Peter in too. And when she comes, she lets him in. She recognizes him there, and he denies that. And then another slave girl recognizes him, same thing there. And then, of course, when the last one was a relative of Malchus's, the high priest's servant, when he recognized him, he saw him in the garden with him, and he said, yeah, and you talk like him too. You talk like a Galilean. You talk like one of Jesus' disciples. And then he curses and swears and says he didn't. And Jesus sees him there, and he goes out, weeps bitterly there. You remember Judas Iscariot also has regrets over this, tries to undo the betrayal by returning the money, but they won't accept that back. And so he goes out and hangs himself there, but wouldn't fix his spiritual problem there, and he just ends in misery and continues on into hell. This week we're going to see the next question that Jesus asked. This is actually the first phase of the civil trials of the Roman officials. I do want to go back and look at John 18:24. We'll read that before you go. But if you want to hold your place here in John 18, we are going to go back to Mark and a couple other places there to see the other two phases of the religious trials with the Jewish before we go on very briefly. Annas was the first phase there. That's the father-in-law to Caiaphas. Remember, even though he's supposed to be the high priest until he dies, the Romans have went ahead and established Caiaphas. He's their puppet high priest, and they changed those regularly even before the high priest died because they're in control. And so if they didn't approve of them after a time, Caiaphas is one of their puppets. He is the one who maintained that office the longest of anybody during the Roman era. And so he's going to play by their rules most of the time. But you see there in John 18:24 that we read last time, now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest. So he moves from Annas to Caiaphas there. John doesn't give the details of that, so we're going to catch some of that from Mark and Matthew. But remember, they can't take their case to the Roman government without some kind of accusation against him. And they don't have any yet. They don't have any kind of evidence. They don't have any kind of witnesses there. That's why Jesus had told them, said, well, ask the people. They ask him about his doctrine, about his disciples and all that. And he says, well, ask those that heard me. I've done all this openly, publicly. Ask those that heard me. Bring witnesses in. Hold a legal trial. And you remember the officer standing by there slaps him in the face. That was an insult to the high priest to say something like that. And so they're going to try to find some witnesses, try to find an accusation against him. So look over Mark chapter 14. We'll pick up part of it over there. Mark chapter 14, verse 56. And this is the part before Caiaphas. Still dark. Still dark. Any of these trials that are done before daylight are all illegal. You can't have a trial before daylight. No, never. You couldn't force a person to testify against themselves. You had to call a witness to do that. And lots of violations of legal trial. None of the 6 trials, by the way, are legal trials. None of them are. The 3 religious trials and the 3 Roman trials there's something illegal about each one of them all throughout that process there, but that's okay. God's accomplishing his will through that. But you see there in Mark 14, verse 56, they're trying to get some kind of witness against Jesus. They've got plenty of witnesses. The problem is not getting witnesses that will say something against Jesus, because the Jews have kind of brainwashed some of the people there into their way of thinking, and so they've kind of got a lot of people that will stand up and testify. The problem of it is there in verse 56, you see, for many bear false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. can't find two people that'll say the same thing independently from each other. That's the problem, because these are false witnesses. They're trying to make up false accusations, and so not going to find that. They do have one event, though, that keeps coming up, several of them mentioned, and that's there in verse 58 and 59 of Mark 14. He says, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands.' But neither so did their witness agree together." Now they're talking about two different events there that Jesus talked about. Right? The first one talking about destroying the temple that's made with hands. That's the physical temple. The second part, the temple made without hands, is talking about his physical body that would be killed and then built back, restored back to life on the third day. Right? And so he did prophesy about that. If you look over Mark 13, back before this, Mark 13 and verse 1 chapter back. This is the prophecy about the destruction of the literal temple there in Jerusalem. In Mark 13, 1 and 2, it says, "And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples saith unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. And Jesus answering said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone left upon another that shall not be thrown down." And Jesus is prophesying the destruction of the temple there. That's exactly what happened. When they burned the city there, the gold and the silver and stuff melted down in the cracks of those stones, and the Roman soldiers pried every one of them apart to get that stuff out. Not one stone was left. The only thing left there today is the foundation part. It's not the actual walls of the temple or the buildings there. None of that standing. It was all pried apart. So that was fulfilled there. The Romans did that in 70 AD. And that's when God officially ended the sacrificial system. The sacrificial system was void after Jesus died, was buried, and resurrected. There's no more animal sacrifice for sin that's going to be sufficient. It's substituted. It's replaced by Jesus's. So that was supposed to have ended there. But the Jews kept on doing it, and finally God just allowed the whole temple to be destroyed in 70 AD, and the sacrificial system ended. There have been no sacrifices of the Jews since that period of time there. The other event he was talking about is John chapter 2. Now the witnesses that come together, they're talking about two separate events, but they talk about them like they're the same thing. Like the destruction of the temple and the destruction of his body are the same thing. John 2 is the other time that he talked about that in verse 19 through 21. John chapter 2, 19 through 21. He says, Jesus answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. That time he's not talking about the literal temple. He's talking about his body there. And so Jesus didn't combine the two events when he talked about them. He talked about them separately, but when they come to witness against it, trying to get some kind of accusation against them, they tried to combine those things together. That's why Mark 14:59 says, but neither so did their witness agree together. They can't get their story straight. They weren't paying close attention, so they heard it wrong. They heard what they wanted to hear instead of what Jesus was actually saying there. Back in Matthew 26, verse 62, Caiaphas, this is the second portion of the trials there with the religious leaders, the Jews. Annas was first, Caiaphas is second, and this same group with Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, all those people, they'll have a third one, which is actually the same group. They're kind of trying to have one at daylight because they knew they had to have a trial at daylight. The Sanhedrin council can't vote at nighttime. They're actually supposed to weigh the evidence on a capital crime, something, and that's supposed to be at least a 1 to 2 day waiting period. They're supposed to go separate from the other members. There's 70 members of the Sanhedrin council plus the high priest, so 71 of them. Supposed to stay separated from each other and then come back and vote. They cast a stone to do their vote there, and they were supposed to do that independently there. And they didn't do that. They just have their meeting real quick, have their vote, and it's over with. It's an illegal trial. But Matthew 26:62, Caiaphas is frustrated because he can't find any matching witnesses, right? And this is what we see in Matthew 26 62 through 66. He says, And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said. Nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? They answered and said, He is guilty of death. Now, when Jesus says there in verse 64, Thou hast said, that's an affirmation. He's confirming what they've just said. It's not like, if somebody says something, Joe tells me something, and I say, well, that's what you say. Right? That's not what he's saying there. This is an affirmation. He's agreeing with that. That's what those words mean there. And he has just affirmed that he has already told them multiple times in multiple ways that he is the Christ, that he is God in human flesh. Right? And so the high priest demands that outright answer here, Art thou the Christ? Right? The Son of God. And he says, Thou hast said. He agrees to that there. It's true, which in their minds is blasphemy. Now, the third phase of the Jewish trials is just a formality. Once they've all heard that, the Sanhedrin's there, the chief priests are there, the high priest is there. That's in the darkness, and then just a short period after this, they wait for the daylight to kind of presume to have a legal trial, legitimate trial. And so in Luke chapter 22, you get that portion of it. Very short. They go right from this very short trial meeting with the Sanhedrin Council. The Sanhedrin Council, by the way, is like their Supreme Court in our system today. That's the highest court for the Jews, is the Sanhedrin Council. So Luke 22, 66 through 71 says, And as soon as it was day, just as soon as the light breaks over the horizon there, he says, And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him into their council, saying, Art thou the Christ? Tell us. And he said unto them, If I tell you, ye will not believe. And if I also ask you, you will not answer me, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then said they all, Art thou then the Son of God? And he said unto them, Ye say that I am. And they said, What need we any further witness? For we ourselves have heard of his own mouth. And so they have what they believe is a confession of guilt. He's just affirmed it. Same kind of thing, right? And so capital crime of blasphemy under the Jewish law. That's what they believe. He's pretending to be God and he's not God. That's what they're saying. That would be a punishable offense, a capital offense in the Jewish law. If you say you're God and you're not God, that is punishable by death. Right? We know that to be true from the Old Testament Scripture, but the main focus of our study, that's the three religious trials. The main focus this evening is going to be John 18, and beginning in verse 28. That's where we left off last time. So if you're still holding your place, blasphemy is a capital punishment under Jewish law. It's not a capital punishment under Roman law, though. The Romans don't care anything about that. So they have to find a way around that in order to get Jesus crucified. And so that's the focus here from John 18. I'm going to read verse 28 through 38, and then we'll go a little deeper into it. It says, John 18, 28. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. Pilate saith unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews, and saith unto them, I find no fault at all. I find in him no fault at all. Now, like I said, this is the first phase of the Roman civil trials. He'll stand before Pilate, he'll stand before Herod, he'll come back before Pilate again. That's the three Roman trials. They've taken him from Caiaphas' palace. That's where the Sanhedrin Council would meet there. That's where they assembled. The judgment hall that he's talking about here, this is the governor Pilate's courtroom here in Jerusalem. It's also called the Praetorium. That's a Latin word that means judgment hall. If you ever hear that word praetorium, in the Greek it would be praetorion, but it's the same place. If you hear those judgment hall, praetorium, praetorion, those are all the same place. But anyway, this is where they held the court. That's where those court proceedings were. And so that's kind of like the Jews' version. Caiaphas' palace would be the Jewish version of their courtroom there with the Sanhedrin Council, and the judgment hall or the Praetorium would be the Roman version of that. And so Jesus comes and he's brought into the judgment hall. Now, the Jews are allowed to go into the judgment hall. They just won't go into the judgment hall. They won't go under the roof of a Gentile because they believe that will defile them. And we see there because they wanted to eat the Passover. They want to celebrate the Passover. And if they're unclean in some way, then there's a waiting period. Touch a dead body, you've got to wait 7 days. You're defiled in some way, you've got a waiting period. And so, that's why they won't do that. This is the preparation of the Passover feast for them, right? And that's the same reason a lot of those people condemn Jesus for going in and eating with publicans and sinners. He was going under the roof of some of those Gentile people and having a meal with them, right? And they believed that defiled them. That's not God's law, that you couldn't go under the roof of a Gentile or you'd be defiled. That's their laws. That's their own man-made traditions, their rules, right? And so not God's laws, but that's why they won't go in, right? And so while this trial is going on, Pilate has taken Jesus inside the judgment hall. They won't go in. Right? And so it's not a legitimate trial. No part of this is a legitimate trial because you're supposed to be able to stand and defend yourself before your accusers. We see the same thing today. If you have a court proceeding and one of the two parties doesn't show up, what do they do with the court case? Out. Right? You have to be able to defend yourself before your accusers. They're not doing that. They've taken Jesus inside. The Jews are staying outside. So it's an odd thing where Pilate keeps going into the judgment hall talking to Jesus, and then he comes back out and talks to the Jews. And he goes back in and talks to Jesus. It's really kind of ridiculous how they've got him doing this. Now, Pilate's supposed to be the one in charge. He's the governor. He's supposed to be making the rules under the Roman authority, but you see here that he's not. The Jews say, we're not going to come in the judgment hall because it'll defile us for the Passover. You're going to have to just talk to him, come back out and talk to us. And you try that with a judge nowadays, what are they going to say? They're going to laugh you out, right? That's ridiculous. That's not how it works. We're going to see why that happens this way, but in just a minute. But it's not a legal trial. As this goes on, you'll see Jesus is displaying himself in absolute holy perfection throughout the whole trial. The way he handles himself, the way he deals with his accusers, the way he deals with the Roman authorities. He's fulfilling all of those prophecies wonderfully. He's a perfect example of forgiveness and refusing to get vengeance on others, even those who want to hurt you or want to kill him, of course, there. And it becomes more and more obvious. The accusers get uglier and uglier. Their true nature starts coming out, and Jesus just remains perfect, remains holy. And you see that he truly is the Son of God in that, just in human flesh. There have been 5 other attempts on Jesus' life. I confess I'd only realized 4 originally from Scripture. There may be more, but we get 4 definitely in Scripture. But there is a 5th one. Herod the Great, of course, is one. When he's a baby there, the wise men come to visit, and he gives out the order, kill all the babies 2 years and under in that whole area there, attempting to kill Jesus. That was one attempt on his life when he's still an infant there. The other one that I actually had forgotten about is when Satan tries to get him to throw himself off the pinnacle of the temple. Right? That's an attempt on his life. Right? Because that would have been tempting God. That's why he says to Satan, no, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Satan says, well, the Scripture says you won't even dash your foot against a stone. The angels will bear you up, and you just go ahead and prove that you're God by jumping off. And yeah, he could have jumped off there and died right there at the temple. That's, I believe, an attempt on his life also. You see that from Luke chapter 4. But the people of his own hometown of Nazareth there, when he's preaching there in the synagogue, they try to shove him off the cliff, run him out of town, and was going to shove him off the cliff to stone him there, kill him there. And when he told them that he was the Messiah that was fulfilling the prophecy of the Old Testament there, they went out and tried to kill him. That's also in Luke 4. Then you see in John chapter 8, he's teaching in the temple. He identifies himself as the I Am. Yahweh, Jehovah, the self-existent God. When he does that in John 8:59, then took they up stones to cast at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. And then the other one, the 5th one, at the Feast of Dedication in John chapter 10, when Jesus said, I and my Father are one. We're both God. And when he said that, John 10:31, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. 5 times they tried to do that. Herod, of course, Herod the Great didn't care if it was a public or not. If you're going to kill all the babies in the land, you don't care if everybody knows about it or not. He was that powerful at that time and ruled over the whole area of Palestine, not like at this time where his sons and some others have been given jurisdiction after his death. But he didn't care if that was public or not. Satan, of course, didn't care either. Right? Anything he could do to thwart God's plan of salvation, anything to throw that off track, he doesn't care about that. The Jews didn't really seem to have a problem with attempting to kill Jesus either. When they tried to shove him off the cliff in Nazareth, the 2 times that they were going to pick up stones there at the temple, right? That's right there by Fort Antonio. They've got Roman soldiers there stationed there all the time. He doesn't seem to have a trouble at all, or even think about it. They're just going to pick up stones and kill him and say, well, we'll deal with the consequences later there. But we see after this, after Jesus is resurrected, goes back to heaven, Stephen becomes the first martyr for Christ. And what did they do to him? They stoned him. Stoned him. Right? And we don't see that they had any kind of repercussions from the Roman government over that. Right? It's kind of like, he's not really a loss to us. Not really. They don't really seem to have anything. And so, but even at those other times when they didn't really care about following the laws, they weren't allowed to stone anybody under Roman government. Only the Roman government was allowed to kill somebody or crucify them, right? And so they weren't really concerned about that, but now they want this to be a public execution. They want the Roman government to kill Jesus. It's not one of these things, right, where they're going to take it into their own hands. Right? So in John 18 there, verse 28, he says, then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. They rushed through. As soon as daybreak, they had the Sanhedrin meeting there. They had their votes. Right? They rushed him right over to Pilate's judgment hall there. It's very early. Why do they go so early? Well, it's not like our court system today. In our court system today, they tell you when you're going to come to court. Right? If you schedule a trial, they'll say, well, your trial is going to be on such and such date. Show up at that such and such time. At this time, who goes into the judgment hall first? Whoever gets there first. It's more of a first come, first serve thing. We see that in Old Testament times too, where the king was supposed to pronounce judgment. He'd go to a certain place and the people would come in. And it was just like a line of people. And they judged case by case, one right after another. First come, first serve. Same thing here. And so they want to get this taken care of. They want to be the first one on the court docket is what's happening. Verse 29 says, Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They bring Jesus bound there. They bring him to the judgment hall, and he wants to know, what are the charges? What are you accusing him of there? And, is this something worth their time? Or is this just some kind of frivolous lawsuit and he's going to throw it out? Right? In John 18:30, when Pilate asked about the accusations, this is amazing. John 18:30. They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. What's that? What kind of accusation is that? Well, if he's not guilty, we wouldn't have brought him here. Right? It's really like they've been insulted. Right? They've been insulted. We're respectable religious people. Surely we wouldn't bring an innocent person here to have them convicted by the Roman authorities there. But that's exactly what they've done. They brought an innocent person there, and Jesus, and going to have him convicted. But look at verse 31 and 32 of John 18. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Right? So, they said it's not, we're going to follow the laws. We're going to do everything legal like. They haven't yet. Right? They haven't yet. The 3 trials they've had, and now this trial's not a legal trial because they're outside and Jesus is inside. Right? Not before his accusers there. But it seems like they're barking out the orders to the governor. They've already got him running in and out, asking one questions and coming back out and talking to the other and back and forth. And so, the thought's got to be going through your mind, what is wrong with that guy? Why is he doing that? Why is he allowing them to dictate how this plays out? Right? And interesting thing about this, and we're going to see some of this, but you remember the title of governor, right? That's the same title that was given to Quirinius. Right. When Quirinius was governor of Syria, that's a general ruler. It's not an official Roman title for a position of authority there. Right. There were other people in these same areas here. Right. Herod Antipas was one. That's one of Herod the Great's sons. Philip was one. That's another one of his sons. They were both kings of their districts. Right. They're kings. Right. But you remember there was one, Herod Archelaus. Herod Archelaus is the one that Jesus told that parable about the nobleman going into a far country and he comes back. And it was talking about when Herod Archelaus took over, he killed like 3,000 Jews right off the bat, trying to make an example, trying to demonstrate his power, and the Jews absolutely hated him. And so what did they do? They sent messengers to Caesar to gripe about it. Right? And Caesar came back and took his title away. He wasn't even allowed to be king. He was an ethnarch, right, which is an official title. It's just not a king's title, right? And so Herod Archelaus was an ethnarch, and he says, if you can rule these people the right way, we'll give you that title back. Let you be the king of them. He never did. It went from bad to worse, and they finally removed him. After they removed him, they started placing governors, which is even a lower title. They're just a general ruler. And so that's what's happened up until this time. They've had governors over this area there. And Pilate now is the governor. He's the one. And he's had a rocky start. He really has. He's had a rough start. And the Jews are actually what's going on here. And you see this play out, the reason they're telling him, he's going in and out and doing all these things, and they're telling him what to do with Jesus, and not, even though it's not a legal proceeding, they still pressure him into it. And you say, well, what kind of authority do they have over him? Right? He's supposed to be ruling over them. What they're doing is blackmailing him. Right? When he first took over, this is some history thing, when Pilate first came to Jerusalem, trying to make a name for himself. He has this big entrance coming into Jerusalem, brings soldiers in, has this big spectacle. They've got banners and flags and all those kind of things. Up on top of the banners, they've got a bust, like a little head of the Caesar, on the top of those poles. And they bring them over there and they plant them in Jerusalem. Now, the Jews already are mad about the coins. Remember, the taxes that they have to pay has Caesar's image on it too, right? And they were asking Jesus, is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar? Right? Because this looks like a graven image. Right? And Caesar wanted to be worshipped as God. And so when they bring these flags in there with this bust of Caesar on top, and they plant them there in Jerusalem, it looks like a graven image to them. And they say, no, we don't want those there. And they asked the governor to take it away. Now, some of the other governors before them did the exact same thing, only they knew that would offend the Jewish people, and they took them off before they brought them in the city. Pilate won't do that. He says, no, we're not going to have that nonsense. We're not going to come in here and take these things off the top of these flag poles and do all that kind of stuff. No, you're just going to have to live with it, right? And so he goes back to Caesarea. If you got that yellow map in your Bible there of Palestine, I don't even have mine with me. It's up around the front pew. If you've got that yellow map, if you look all the way over on the edge of backward. You look over on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea there in Samaria. Look for the region of Samaria. Judea's down at the bottom. Samaria's in the middle. Galilee's up at the top. If you see Samaria there in the middle, go all the way over to the coast there at the Mediterranean Sea and you'll see Caesarea. See what I'm talking about? Okay, that's where Pilate has his headquarters most of the time. He's the governor over Samaria and Judea. And so that's where he has his headquarters most of the time. He has this big stink there when he brought all this stuff into Jerusalem with the Caesar's head on top of the flagpoles and all those kind of things. And he says, no, I'm not going to take those away. And he just leaves. He goes back to Caesarea and he says, they're going to stay here. Right? They followed him back to Caesarea. Right? For 5 days. 5 days they tormented him over and over and over. Just every time he comes out into public, they're tormenting him about getting rid of those images that he has set up in Jerusalem. And finally he says, I tell you what, meet me at the amphitheater and we'll settle this. There's a big amphitheater there in Caesarea. And so he says, just meet me in the amphitheater and we'll settle this. So they go to the amphitheater there, the whole big group of Jews there, and he comes in with the Roman soldiers. And he says, this is what's going to happen. Right? I'm going to leave those things in Jerusalem. Right? And if you don't stop and go home and quit tormenting me, I'm going to kill y'all. Right? And so they did this. They bore their necks and said, go ahead, chop them off. Right? Chop them off. Right? We're not going to go back and live like that. Right? And they called his bluff. Right? They were unarmed men there in the amphitheater, a whole big crowd of them, and Pilate says, whatever, just take them down. Right? And so he takes them down. Right? And so that was the first incident. The next one, Jerusalem's dealing with a shortage of water. Right? Jerusalem sits up on a Mount Zion. Right? They had a shortage of water there. One of the ways that the Roman Empire got water to people was aqueducts. Right? They build these aqueducts to channel water into the city. And so he realized Jerusalem needs more water. We're going to have an aqueduct. The problem of it is he didn't have the money to build it with. Right? So guess where he got the good citizens of Judea to donate the money from? The temple. Right? They go into the temple, they rob the temple treasury, and he pays for his aqueduct with it. Right? The people, there were riots with the Jewish people, right? Just all kinds of rebellion about that. He has to bring the soldiers in again. A whole bunch of them got killed during that incident too. All of this now, they're a good ways away from Rome. But all of this stuff keeps trickling back to Rome. Right? The thing about the flagpoles and the bus, right, and that, and now the aqueduct, and he robbed the temple and all that. It keeps going back to it. And he's not gaining very good favor with Caesar. And so he says, okay, I'm going to do something to try to get back in Caesar's good graces. Right? And so he has these metal shields made with Tiberius Caesar on them. right, inscribed on these shields. Right? Guess where he sets them up? Jerusalem. Right? Jerusalem. And the Jews did the exact same thing. They protested. Pilate refused. Right? And that time, right, they didn't go hound him back to Caesarea. They just went straight to Caesar and said, no, we don't want these images in there. And so Caesar sends word back and says, take the shields down. What do we need that for? Right? It's unnecessary. Right? So he's already had 3 incidents, right, that looks bad on him. Even when he was trying to do something good to get in favor with Tiberius Caesar, he's got 3 incidents that look bad. And so he's afraid if something else comes up in Jerusalem with these Jews, he's going to be out. Right? The Roman government, the Caesar, just going to put somebody else in charge. And so they're using that to blackmail him here. That's what's going on with these trials. And so he's kind of their puppet. Right? They're telling him how to hold the trials. They're telling him who to kill, who to let go. All of those things is playing into those things. And even though they're bogus charges against Jesus, Pilate goes ahead and plays their game because he knows what might happen if he doesn't. If the Jews go back to Caesar again, he could be out altogether. And he wants to release him. There in John 18:38 says, Pilate saith unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all. Now you can skip ahead there in John 19, John 19 verse 4, 1 chapter ahead. Pilate therefore went forth again and saith unto them, behold, I bring him forth to you that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Again in verse 6 of chapter 19, when the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. 3 times he keeps coming out and saying, I just can't find it. He hasn't done anything wrong. Right? There's no fault at all in him. And Pilate's trying to let him go. Right? When that won't work, there in verse 6, Pilate says, take ye him and crucify him. Right? He's giving them permission there. You all go ahead and take him and crucify him yourself. I don't want to crucify him. He's not guilty of anything. Right? And so, they're insisting, though, that Pilate do it. Right? They're not going to do it. Right? They want it to be a public spectacle, and they want the Roman government to be behind it. They hated the Roman authority. They hated paying those taxes with the coins with Caesar's face on it. Right? They even avoided paying taxes whenever possible. A lot of the Jews did. So they brought Jesus without any violation of Roman law, and they accused Pilate of insulting them and trying to get them to violate Roman law by killing them themselves, which they're not allowed to. Right? And so in John 19, verse 12, you see this. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, if thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. And there's that threat again. You let this go on, you're not a friend of Caesar's. That's going to get back to him. Because they're going to tell him. That's what's going to happen. They're going to tell him it's blackmail. That's what it's doing. That's what they're doing to him here. So we talked about there in Leviticus 24:16. You don't have to turn to that. But the penalty from the Mosaic law for blasphemy isn't crucifixion. Crucifixion hadn't been invented yet when the Mosaic law was given there. The punishment was stoning, Leviticus 24:16. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him, as well the stranger as he that is born in the land, when he blasphemeth the name of the Lord, shall be put to death. That was the punishment, but it was stoning. Right? They're accusing him of a blasphemy, but they're not going to stone him. They're going to insist that he be crucified. And so Jesus' death, though, has to fulfill prophecy. It has to follow God's plan. Back in John 18:32, we see that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. He's already told him what death he should die. Back in John 12:32, it says, and I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. Right? The Jews didn't lift a person up to kill them. The Romans did that, and they put them on a cross. They lifted them up to kill them. The Jews cast somebody down and stone them. That's how they did it. But Jesus said, no, I'm going to be lifted up and draw all men to myself. And so that prophecy is going to be fulfilled there. Pilate there, back in John 18:33, Pilate starts interrogating Jesus. Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Now, why does Pilate land on that? Look back in Luke 23. Back in Luke 23 and verse 2. Why does Pilate land on this? What even brings this up about him being a king? Right? Why does he ask Jesus about being a king? Because Jesus, remember, when they tried to take him to be a king, he refused that. He knew they were going to try to force him to be a king, and he separated himself from the people, wouldn't allow that to happen. It's not time for him to set up the kingdom. But Luke 23:2, right, you see there, he says, And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. So they drum up these false charges there. Here's the charges there, perverting the nation. Right? What they're saying is literally distorting or misinterpreting or turning away the nation away from Rome. That's what they're talking about there, perverting the nation there. It's accusation that somehow Jesus is distorting things or misrepresenting things about the Roman Empire, trying to turn the Jewish people away to rebel, getting them to rebel against the Roman authority. That's what they're accusing him of. Right? We know that didn't happen. Right? The next one there is forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, telling people not to pay their taxes. Right? We talked about that a short time ago when they asked him, is it lawful for the Jews to give tribute to Caesar? And in Mark 12:17, and Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. He says, look at the picture of the coin, right? Whose inscription is it? Right? It's Caesar's. The money's his. He minted that money. It belongs to him. It's just money. If he requires taxes, pay the taxes. But the things that belong to God is worship. And remember, they did want Caesar to be worshipped as God. And he says, you give them all the money they want if they demand that in form of taxes. But don't worship Caesar. That belongs only to God. Right? And so he didn't tell them not to pay their taxes. And the other one, though, is saying that himself is Christ, a king. Now that part about Christ is true. He is a king. And he is the Messiah there. But he's not trying to make himself a king yet. He's not setting up a kingdom yet. He's not a threat to the Roman authorities in any way at this time. The Jews have a general disgruntlement about Roman authority, but it's without insurrection. They're not really having a rebellion against the government there. That's not a capital offense. Right? You have people today, they say, well, I don't like some of the rules that the government has come up with. We don't like some of the rules that the government has come up with. We don't like some of the things that they've allowed in our country, and abortion and same-sex marriage and those kind of things. We don't like those kind of things, right? You'll find people that don't like paying taxes either. Right? There are certain things that we understand that taxes are good. They have lots of good things, good benefits from taxes, but they use some of those things against what we would want them to be used from, and that's understandable. And so there's just a kind of a general distaste about those kind of things. That doesn't mean we're going to storm the White House lawn and break down fences and bring guns and all that kind of stuff. That's not, it doesn't change anything. It's not a capital offense. It's not even a misdemeanor to have those kind of feelings about those kind of things. You can have those. Same thing under Roman authority, right? But telling others that they shouldn't pay their taxes, that's not a capital offense either, right? If I tell Gail, don't pay your taxes this year, Gail, right? Well, if Gail don't pay her taxes, who are they going to put in jail? It ain't going to be me. Right? Gail can't say, well, Ron told me not to pay my taxes. You all go arrest him. And they'll just laugh. Right? That'll be so funny. Right? No. That's not an offense to tell somebody not to pay your taxes. Certainly not a capital offense. It is a capital offense, though, in Roman times, if you try to make yourself a king. You try to put yourself over the Roman authority. Right, then that is a capital offense. And so that's where Pilate kind of lands on this interrogation. Jesus asked this question there in verse 34. Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Right? Well, what's he saying there? Is this something that you came up with all on your own? that I was trying to make myself a king? Or did somebody else put that little bug in your ear? Right? Somebody else tell you to say that. Right? That's coming from the Jewish leaders. That's who that's coming from, those kind of accusations there, which is why Pilate replies this way in verse 35. Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Right? Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priest have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done?" Right? Pilate says, "Why would I be a messenger for the Jews? I'm not Jewish. Right? Why would that have anything to do with me? Right? They're the ones that have come and told me this. Your own people have accused you of this. What have you done? What have you done for them to do this to you?" And so, because he still has no idea what Jesus is guilty of. Right? Caesar and Jesus don't have the same kind of kingdom. Right? Which is why Jesus is no threat to Rome at this time. No threat whatsoever. John 18:36, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then when my servants fight, then I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence." He says, my kingdom is not of this world. It's a spiritual kingdom at this time. It's about the kingdom of light, Colossians 1:13, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and who hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. It's still a heavenly kingdom. The kingdom isn't going to come to the earth at this time because the Jews are going to have to play an integral part in the kingdom that Christ sets up on the earth. And they have rejected him as a whole. Right? There are some that have accepted him, but as a whole, as a nation, they've rejected him. And so it's not going to even happen at this time. And so he says there, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. If he was setting up an earthly kingdom, he'd be getting the army together. He'd be having the soldiers together. They're the witnesses here at this trial, the Roman soldiers and those that are here present. They know what just happened at the Garden of Gethsemane. Right? Peter draws the sword. He's going to fight. And Jesus rebukes him. He says, "No, put up your sword." Right? That's not what this is about. Right? He's not trying to set up that kingdom. John 18:37, Pilate therefore said unto him, "Art thou a king then?" Jesus answered, "Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice." Jesus again affirms his kingship. He admits to it. He is a king. He was born to be king. But his subjects are those who accept the truth and make him their king. That's the kind of kingdom he has. Jesus' kingdom isn't about forcing people into subjection. Most of the great kingdoms of the world, Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, Rome, they forced people into subjection. They forced them under their thumb. That was what that's about. God doesn't do that. Could do it at any time, but he doesn't do that. It's not about ruling those who don't want to be ruled. It's about ruling those who want to have him rule their lives. And that's what he's doing. And so, if God's chosen people aren't going to get on board with that, it's not going to happen. The kingdom's not coming at this time. So they haven't. Right? But Jesus does give the two sides of that there. He says, "To this end was I born." Jesus said, "I became human. I was born as a human to suffer the penalty of sin." The other part of this, "For this cause came I into the world." He already existed before he was born in the world because he was God. He was eternal, just like the Father, just like the Holy Spirit there. And so he just came to the world as God to be the Savior of the world. So we can be a part of that kingdom. Look at John 18:38. Pilate saith unto him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and saith unto them, "I find in him no fault at all." The whole point of a trial is what? To sort out the what? Truth. The truth. You want to find the truth, right? Is the person being accused of some kind of criminal activity? Are they actually guilty or not? Right? What's the truth in that? Right? Why do we need witnesses? Why does evidence need to be presented at a trial? Well, because people who are guilty sometimes do what? Even under oath. Lie. They lie. Right? If they think it's going to save their hide, they'll lie. Right? They do that. So the whole point of the trial is to sort out who's telling the lies and who's telling the truth. Right? That's what all of those things are. And so Jesus is both guilty and innocent all at the same time, this trial. He's guilty and innocent. He is a king, King of kings, Lord of lords. And if those were the charges, then he's guilty, except he's not trying to overthrow the Roman government. His kingdom's not of this world yet. But he would be guilty of being a king. Pilate wants to know the truth, but not the truth about eternity. Not about eternity. He wants to know about Rome. Is this man Jesus a threat to the Roman authority that occupies the land? And the answer to that is no. He's already said it 3 times in those verses that we read. I find no fault in him at all. I find no fault in him at all. I find no fault in him at all. He's not a threat to the Roman authority in any way whatsoever. Right? None at ever. Right? He's not a threat to pervert the people, cause them to rebel against Rome. He's not trying to convince people not to pay their taxes. He's not trying to start an insurrection. He's not guilty of any of those things there. But by the accusations that the Jews have made, he's innocent. Right? But as God, as King of kings and Lord of lords, he could still be considered guilty. Right? He's the only person that could fit both of those. You have any trial anywhere in the world, all throughout history, and the person is either guilty or innocent. They can't be both. Now, sometimes guilty people get pronounced innocent and they get off, and sometimes innocent people go to jail because it's not a perfect system. We understand that. But only God can be both at the same time. Okay. Any questions? Any comments?